My name's Trevor Phillips. I used to be a person in television. Today I'm simply the traffic warden for our discussion on diversity. The only piece of housekeeping I've got to do is to say that towards the end of this session we will have some opportunity for Q&A. But if you have the app, and I assume everybody here knows what that means, I don't, that you will go into the take part section of the app and whack in a question. And I'm told that will, by the magic of new technology, appear on a screen near me. And maybe we'll get a chance to discuss it. This session is about a couple of things. And I want to say, first of all, we all owe a great debt to someone who is not here, Sir Lenny Henry, for really getting this on the agenda. And we're going to hear in a moment from one of his willing and able accomplices, the Minister for Culture, Ed Vaizey. The session's not about whether the industry needs diversity or not. We don't need to discuss that. Everybody's in the same room as that. So anybody who's got a speech that says it's really important, you don't need to have it. You don't need to make it. And for the purposes of this morning, when we're talking about diversity, we're really talking about protected groups. I know there are some people who would like to have a conversation about social background and so on. I think, too, that's important. But in terms of actually what producers have to deal with today, which is what the role of this morning is about, we're talking about identity groups, as it were, and how we manage, how we do better. So that's just a very simple caveat, I suppose, about what we're going to do. So in a moment, we will start a discussion about some of these questions with our distinguished panels. But before, I am really delighted that Ed's joined us today. In the old days, I was just saying to Pat Young, that in the old days, when we had a diversity session at the Edinburgh Television Festival, at the end of it, we would say to each other, like in Macbeth, when shall we three meet again? It's amazing. 150 people, I think, 150 people in the room. It says something about how the industry itself has changed and its priorities has changed. And that's in no small part due to Ed's promptings and encouraging. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say to us this morning. Ed Vaizey.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor. It's wonderful to be here, and I love the idea that I'm Sir Lenny Henry's accomplice. I think I might put that on my business cards from now on, with Lenny's email address at the bottom, so it can all go to him. But I do think Lenny should take a lot of credit for what's happened over the last 2 years. It did start with a conversation between me and him in the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and he told me some home truths, and we got started. And I don't need to give you all the statistics, even though my speech obviously contains some of the statistics. You all know what the position is, and you know how far we have to go in broadcasting. So, as I say on many occasions, although we have done a lot of work over the last year and a half, 2 years, we have really only made a start, and we have to make much, much more progress, and we have to do it much, much more quickly. But we did make a start, and we did get the broadcasters in to discuss this issue. We made it very clear we wanted to see some real action, because having had several round tables, which were really large public meetings, it was very clear to me the anger and frustration that people felt, particularly because they felt they'd had meetings like the ones I was having for the last 30 years and nothing had happened. And some of the broadcasters responded very quickly and very dynamically. Some took rather longer, and perhaps they had bigger bureaucracies to navigate. But they have all come out with pretty clear targets about how they want to change things. And that obviously means on-screen diversity, but also, obviously, diversity throughout the industry. It doesn't just mean the broadcasters, it also means the indies. And it doesn't just mean giving people a start, it means helping people who who are already in their careers as well. That's really important. And it doesn't just mean television, it also means film, and it means, I was really delighted when the British film industry itself also came out of the traps very quickly as well and made it clear that its funding decisions would be linked to clear diversity targets as well. So we've made that start, but there is no way that we will rest on our laurels and just assume that the job has been done because people have come up with these targets and said that they're ready, willing and able to make changes. And it is an incredibly complex issue. I think the other big change that has happened, which will mean that we don't rest on our laurels, is the Creative Diversity Network effectively becoming a permanent organisation. As I said at the Creative Skill Set event, it used to have a rotating chair, which meant that its focus used to change a lot depending on the focus of that particular chairperson. It's now got a permanent chair with John McVeigh and Amanda Aris leading it as well. I think they're both in the audience today. Maybe they'll make some points during the Q&A. And they're involved in this very important monitoring project, Project Diamond, which again might sound superficial and another way of kicking the can down the road, but it will, I think, show us what is happening across all the broadcasters with unequivocal statistics, which will probably look pretty bad, which people can't hide away from and have to address, and it will make broadcasters accountable. And then one of the focuses of today's session is this document, which I hope is on most people's tables. One of the issues that came out of our discussions with broadcasters was people's concern about the Equalities Act, and if they were going to effectively positively discriminate, would they be at risk of breaking the law? And some of the broadcasters who came up with their diversity targets took a long time to do that because they said they were huddled in rooms with lawyers trying to navigate this act. So we worked with the Employment and Human Rights Commission and with Ofcom. They've come up with this important document as a result of that initiative, which is really a bespoke guide to the industry, giving the industry real examples of what they can and cannot do. It's bespoke guidance which is going to help the industry tackle the underrepresentation of people. It's also had the full impact of the creative diversity, input from the Creative Diversity Network, broadcasters, independent production companies, trade unions, and other people working in the television sector. So it is, again, another important milestone in this journey. But as I say, we've only just started this journey. We have, I think, made some rapid progress, but no doubt we'll hear some very interesting points during the discussion and the Q&A. And thank you to everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Let me, I'm going to first introduce the panel. Now I want to say just a couple of words, and then I think we want to get into our discussion. First of all, to my right, Chris Holmes, who is a former Paralympian, a member of the Equality and Human Rights Commission Board, and also a non-crony member of the House of Lords, who is responsible as the board member with some of his colleagues here for producing the guidance, which is, I think, now is jointly EHRC and Ofcom guidance. And I must say, I congratulate the EHRC for getting it to happen. I mean, frankly, it would never have happened under the moron who used to run it, as far as I can remember. Secondly, Kat Lewis, CEO of 9 Lives Media, amongst other things, based outside London, in the nearest thing that television industry, I think, gets to a rural setting, Manchester. Neil Smith, the MD of Betty, and Pat Young, ex-BBC Vision CCO and CEO of Sugar Films. Now, in preparation for this session, I dug out a couple of reports. One, Ethnic On-Screen Analysis from London Weekend Television, Ethnic Minorities on Television from the ITC. One is 1994, one is 1995. It says something about the length of the road we've been on. And we've made progress, as Ed says. But what we really want to talk about is, can we really make the breakthrough? What we've been hearing from producers around the country is about the barriers. Is the law clear enough? Is there enough information available? Have we got the people? Have we got the will? And we're going to examine some of those barriers to this morning and see if by the end of the session we can actually knock some of them down. Now, the broadcasters have set some targets partly for themselves and partly for producers. Here is a list of their ambitions as set out. The two that I particularly want to draw attention to, the BBC and ITV ambitions, I think appear to be mostly about them and their internal culture, I guess. The ones which apply directly to producers, Sky, 20% of on-screen talent and writing teams made up of BAE individuals by 2015, one senior role on each original Sky commission, and Channel 4's two-tick system seemed to me to apply directly to producers. So I just want to quickly ask our producers, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most difficult or doability, if I can put it this way, how doable are these things for producers? Pat?
I think Sky's are 8 out of 10. I think the BBC's are 5 out of 10. I think BBC's are actually not very difficult at all. And I think Channel 4's are probably 8 out of 10. You will have to do some work, but they are achievable.
Neil?
I'd probably say a similar thing. ITV's quite low down there. Channel 4 and Sky are definitely the tough ones to achieve.
I agree, but I love it. I love Stuart cut the shit Murphy. You know, he just went straight to the heart and said, I'm going to make change. And that's what we needed.
All right, well, let's look at the barriers. First one, the law. There's no way I could meet the targets that are being set without positive discrimination. Now, Chris, you've got your new guidance out today. Does the 2010 Equality Act, full disclosure, I was there, partly responsible for it, but you know, you can say what you like. Does that stand in the way?
Not at all. I think the law, and far be it from me to put lawyers out of business, they are a backbone of our culture for hundreds of years. Dickens recognised that. Long may it continue. The law is clear in this area. What we wanted to do with the guidance was to give examples to really bring it to life in the specific broadcast context. I don't think, in any sense, positive discrimination is needed, required, or desirable. It would be unlawful, so I don't think that's the way that's required. Positive action is certainly what's required, and there's plenty of specific examples in the guide that we've produced where positive action can be taken to make a real difference. As in any business, it starts with leadership right from the top. I think probably we're in as good a shape as at any time, certainly in my life, of understanding the broadcast media with the people who are at the top of the organisation, with Tony Hall at the Beeb, David Abrahams at Channel 4, Stuart at Sky. I think there are people who have diversity and inclusion in their hearts and in their heads. That needs to go right through all levels of the organisation to drive cultural change. It's not just about the money. Money's important, but it's that cultural piece. And if that can be got right, hopefully our guidance can assist to show it's about doing practical things on the ground in every commissioning, every editorial, every decision that's made, having a thread of diversity running through everything. Then we can truly make a transformative change to the broadcast media.
Okay, and I'm going to come to the producers because, you know, we come to these sessions and everybody's on side. Actually, though, when you talk to producers, what they say is, yeah, absolutely, we can't find the people, though, and actually if I were to do what they wanted, it would actually mean me choosing somebody I wouldn't otherwise choose. Bing, positive discrimination. You're asking me to break the law. What do you think, Kat?
I don't believe it's about positive discrimination. I believe it's about nurture, and that's what hasn't happened. You know, since my first job in telly in 1988, there's been numerous training schemes for people from diverse backgrounds, but there's been a revolving door policy. It's been box ticking. We need to have this many percentage people. So what we're going to do is bring in one group and then let them go, bring in another group, let them go, instead of nurturing those people. And that's what we've done within our company. And to be honest, I also think we've all been signing the Creative Diversity Pledge since 2009, you know, we should all have been, you know, employing people from diverse backgrounds and also nurturing them. The problem that we've now got, though, as an industry is there aren't enough senior people. So Asif Hassan, who had been with me for years, and, you know, we nurtured from being producer-director up to being head of development, then to exec producer, it's just been poached by the BBC.
Well, let me come to you on, Pat, because somebody's actually put on the app. How can I hit BAME targets as a producer when broadcasters are rushing to poach my talent?
Well, there's plenty more talent out there. We should be in the growing, you know, we should all be in the sort of growing talent business. I mean, the broadcasters are trying to shortcut that process by going to people that are already in the industry. And that's where those broadcasters which have big in-house operations like the BBC and ITV have a particular duty, especially on disability, but also on race, to bring more people through. But I also think there's a different underlying fundamental question which doesn't get addressed here. I mean, I was in front of the select committee, and the evidence, the BBC published their evidence, you know, 400 black people joined the BBC in 2010 and 500 left. It wasn't that they weren't getting them in, it's just more were leaving. And part of the challenge here is that this is more than about headcount. People want to tell different stories. And people leave because even when you get them in, they're asked to basically conform and tell the same stories that were being told before. And the fundamental shift that needs to happen is a shift towards accepting that there are more ways of looking at the world than the ways that the commissioning group, as currently constituted, sees the world. You know, that's why the BBC Commissioner thing is so important, and the CDN Commissioner thing is so important. Because until people start going to different plays, reading different... When I ever hear this thing about there aren't enough black writers, there are loads of black writers, there are loads of black books. Now, the problem is the people who commission stuff don't read them. They don't go to those plays, they don't watch those shows. You know, and it's not just about the numbers, it's about telling different stories. And until we accept that diversity is about a different outlook on the world and different stories on air and different people telling them and that they have equal value, it won't work.
Neil, in a way, Pat's made this relationship between who's there and the stories that you tell or stories that you can say something about. And you've made a fantastic success of this, particularly in relation to disability. Does that make sense to you? I suppose the question is, can this kind of diversity end up as a commercial advantage?
Yes.
Can you turn it into one?
I think so, and I think that's sort of, I mean, we choose to invest in diversity, so, you know, we work in order, you know, in order to be more inclusive, we take part in the Creative Access internship, so we take 2 interns every year. We take part, we work with Mama Youth alumni. We take part in CDN events and BBC events. And all that brings talent in, and what we've found is that actually by having diverse talent off screen, then those ideas do come to the fore, and we've actually been able to translate some of those into television shows. So that's literally transferred into a business opportunity for us.
But sticking with our central point here, you don't seem to have found any difficulty with the law or statute allowing you to do what you want to do.
But we've embraced positive action rather than positive discrimination. So this is something we've been doing for several years. So before any targets were brought in, we've always sort of, you know, been involved in these schemes, and so therefore I guess, you know, we've got a fairly good record. But I think we're sort of attacking it from a grassroots level. So for example, I spoke on a CDN fair recently at Ravensbourne, and we directly recruited 2 people from BAME backgrounds from that session. And then once they're at Betty, we try and nurture talent from within by giving them access to training. So we did a series producer course, we do editing, camera skills. But I think we look at it from a sort of quite a grassroots perspective.
But I do think I've worked in nearly all the broadcasters now, and they do hide behind the law, or they do not understand the law, and the law is often what's raised as the stumbling block about why things can't happen.
I agree. Okay, well, I think we're through our hurdle. If we think of this as a video game, we're through level 1. Forget about the law, it's not your problem. A more tricky one, I think, raised by producers, particularly those who are not in, happy clappy, everybody loves everybody else, London, is that the opportunities just aren't there. Kat?
Well, Creative Access have got at least 25 out of London interns at the moment. So I think if producers out of London are worried, they should definitely contact Creative Access. And there's various other schemes as well. Creative Skill Set do a lot of training out of London, and they've got a big focus on the nations and regions. The biggest problem often facing companies outside London is that we don't get enough commissions. There's not enough work. Otherwise we'd be able to employ a lot more people. And I also do a kind of Founders for Schools thing on LinkedIn, which I think is incredibly clever, and it would be good if we could find an app similar to that to use for television. You don't have any communication at all other than you're sent an email once you've signed up saying, this school would like you to come along 9 o'clock in the morning to chat to pupils. And you go, along with other business people, and you meet fantastic range of young people from different backgrounds who wouldn't necessarily think about television as a career. Because I think one of the problems is there isn't really a definite route in. It's kind of who you know rather than what you know. So the more London-centric and the more upper middle class it becomes, the less likely it is that people from a range of different backgrounds are going to be able to work in television, especially if they have to kind of do free work experience for weeks and weeks on end in London. But certainly in all the major cities, there are a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, and it's just a case of reaching out to them.
But from what I read in the newspapers, BBC's moved to Salford, that's where it's all happening. Is it genuinely an issue of if you're outside London, the pool isn't as big, or is that not an issue for any of you?
Not an issue.
I don't want to be Mr. Contrary today, but I sort of struggle with this one. And I struggle with it in two ways. One, I think it is easy to hit the target in London because actually the target is totally unambitious. London is 40% BAME, maybe 50% BAME, so to have a 15% target is sort of pretty poxy, really. And so much of the industry is based in London, so if you have a national target of 15% and 70% of the industry is in London, and London is 50% BAME, and you should have reached the national target anyway, just through London. That's my first challenge. I think London, I used to go around the country and say, look at portrayal, isn't it got better in terms of BAME? And people say, yeah, it's got better, but the thing about this averaging that we do about the UK-wide position is that if you watch Holby, it's probably blacker than anything anybody in Octomocty or the Clean Peninsula has ever experienced. But if you live in London, it's nowhere near black enough. And so we have this super concentration of ethnic minorities in London, and all the BBC gives them at the moment is 1 hour of Inside Out a week, plus local news. And I'm starting to believe that London should be treated like Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and actually have its own set of services which can speak to London as London in its hyper-diverse sense without scaring the rest of the country into thinking that they've all been sort of taken over. As regards the nations, there are Pakistanis in Glasgow, but when the BBC did lip service there, they had a mixed-race sort of West Indian girl. There are Chinese in Belfast. There are Somalis in Cardiff. They're there. We just need to employ them. You just have to employ them. It's not actually rocket science.
Neil, why isn't it happening, do you think?
We're not hitting targets in the nation and regions?
Pat's basically telling me it's all there. It's not a problem, but actually I'm not seeing it. Why do you think it's not happening?
Across not just in, what you mean everywhere?
In the nations.
In
the nations. Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on the regions, but I mean, I think there's a general, it's, when you're a young person coming into TV for a start, there is a sort of economic barrier. I mean, I remember when I first came to London, I had to squat to get into, telly. I don't know whether the nations and regions is the one for me. I mean, in London, we're doing everything we can, as I say, at grassroots level to get people in.
But we're beginning to concentrate on the ethnicity targets, but of course, actually, the disability targets, the gender ambitions, I should say, LGBT targets should be achievable anyway, shouldn't they? Isn't that the position?
Yes.
I think they should be, but there's still a lot of women who leave after they've had children, and one of the things that I've tried really hard to do in my company is to employ people part-time, because I actually had to leave one broadcaster and join another back in 1990 to start one of the first ever job shares, and it meant the world to me that I could work part-time when my kids were little. So I try and pass that on. And I believe it's great because you basically get more brains for your buck. You know, if you're employing 2 people working on a job share, you know, or you're employing people part-time. And one story that I think is really inspiring is Nell Butler came up with Come Dine With Me, which is one of the, you know, best ever formats, TV formats in terms of commercial success, when she was working 3 days a week. She always says that actually, if you're kind of in the real world, you know, picking up kids from school, doing the food shop, then you're often more in touch with real people rather than sitting at a computer, you know, trying to kind of bash out, you know, one idea after another. And so I think that we should all take inspiration from that.
Okay. Chris, one of the things that independent producers say is, I don't know everybody, you know, and I don't necessarily know people, but I want to employ people from different backgrounds. Isn't there a database somewhere that can tell me this? One of the things we hear from broadcasters is it's very difficult, because Data Protection Act and personal data, and we'll all be locked up, and so on and so forth. You can tell how skeptical I am of this particular position, but there is it is a legal point, and several broadcasters have spent more money than is conscionable, in my view, on getting lawyers to tell them that it's not possible. What is the HRC's position on this? Can you have a database that would, for example, help out of London production companies to find talent which may live in London?
Yes, I think data protection has become the modern day health and safety. It's just we can't, data protection. It's funny that we've got all this data protection stuff, and yet you can't pick your mobile up without being told you've just had an accident, or and presumably the accident happened when you were picking up your compensation for your PPI. So it's extraordinary how that's used. Databases can be a really effective way of developing a pool of talent in whichever particular element we're looking at, be it BME, be it disability. Getting a pool of talents, what we did at London 2012 to really drive our diversity program was have these talent pools, these databases, where you can have the particular characteristics set out on the database, perfectly lawful to do that, and it gives that opportunity for people to know where they can come to find potential talent. It becomes unlawful if you chose to just recruit specifically from a database which just had, say, BME people on it. But that's not the point. It's about creating these pools of talent where people can know to draw on it. Because one of the often heard excuses that we've come across in the broadcast industry is someone gets a commission on a Friday night. They absolutely have to get everything in place by Monday, get the team together. So they pick up the phone, do the ring round to all the usual suspects. Now, that isn't in many senses different to a lot of businesses. It's no different to ad industry. It's no different to PR. It's no different to the law, frankly. Stuff happens. You need to get teams together. That's not a problem of itself. It's only a problem if people haven't done that work to get those bases there, the databases, different networks connected with people. So when that call comes, there's a whole rich talent pool to be drawn upon to, frankly, not just do diversity, but to make better programs.
Okay. Right. Somebody's sent us a message, said, I've heard many people in Edinburgh say they can't find diverse staff, but when looking for production staff, execs often want people with particular films on their CVs in terms of what they've made before, and the advice here is production companies, I beg your pardon, need to be more open-minded about what they expect to see on CVs when they recruit, maybe. Note to everybody in the room.
Could I also, just on that point, just very quickly, and also, why do we still have application forms that say, what are your qualifications, rather than what films have you made? I mean, the whole recruitment process is still sort of university-driven, O-levels, A-levels, degree. Actually, there are people making films and putting them online, and where does that ever feature on an application form?
Okay.
And the commissioners also restrict who we can employ to make films. It's not, I don't have the final say on who makes a film. You know, I'm told by the commissioning editor who I'm allowed to give a film to, and that's a big problem. If the commissioning editors always want to be risk averse, they always want to see that, you know, somebody's made exactly the same kind of film before, and that's where we have to kind of move beyond.
Okay, any commissioning executives in the room? I'll hear from you in a moment. The last one that we hear, Chris, is, last but one, I beg your pardon, is disabled people. You, Chris, you're just bloody expensive to have around.
It's true. You couldn't afford me, Trevor. It's true. I'm slightly disgusted with myself that I got out of bed this morning, really. But,
wasn't the 10 grand enough?
Excellent. This is often put as a reason: too expensive, too difficult, just avoid it, uncomfortable with it, never experienced being with a disabled person, ooh, keep it away from me. You know, particularly, I know we're in Scotland, but I think as English people, even more than British people, I think we'd rather throw ourselves in front of a truck than have an embarrassing conversation or do the wrong thing. But the reality is, disabled people, like any group across society, will have similar levels of skill, similar levels of creativity. That has to be brought to bear. And actually, the concept of reasonable adjustments, it's to focus on that word reasonable. This isn't about small indies having to put in changes which would ruin them as a business or make the production uneconomic. Not at all. For example, if there was a presenter who needed to have breaks, so to stop her or his condition flaring up, if that can be built into the production schedule, absolutely, that's a lawful reasonable adjustment. If it's such a tight thing that it wouldn't be possible, then that may be not necessary to make that adjustment. It has to be based on reasonableness and getting into that whole concept. Looking at access to work funds and things which can be drawn upon through that source, and crucially on that, that's why the one single thing I believe that could be done where broadcast industry could lead the way is to stop once and for all unpaid internships, to have a proper process for internships, so it's not just your dad, your mum, your uncle, Uncle Jeffrey who sorted you out. It happens in other sectors, but the broadcast media could just be trailblazers if that was just all stopped once and for all and there was a proper process into it. That would enable disabled people, alongside everybody else, to compete. None of this is about political correctness. None of this is about giving somebody an unfair advantage. It's simply about saying, everybody have a fair go to get into this brilliant British business.
Neil, I was noticing, you know, you've got a pair of really expensive shoes on, so clearly
Half
Betty.
price in the sale.
So yeah. Well, it's clear that Betty.
They were in the Selfridges window for
Betty's
ages.
not. Betty's not doing too badly. So clearly, Undatables didn't break you.
No, it didn't.
How did you deal with the cost issue? Because it's not a negligible point, is it?
Well, I mean, we've had several disabled people working and still working at Betty. We've just not actually experienced that it is a cost issue. Adam Pearson, for example, who came to us, who suffers from neurofibromatosis, is a really good example of what we talked about diverse, you know, off-screen leads to diverse on-screen, it leads to business opportunities. So Adam, for example, the only thing that we had to do with him was that he has tumours on his face, quite serious tumours on his face, which affect his eyesight. So we made sure that the screen that he was working on, he's working with us at the moment, has sort of a larger typeface. But apart from that, you know, that was pretty much it. But actually, through Adam, we were able to, you know, he helped us develop a show called Beauty and the Beast, which we made for Channel 4. He's just done a show on BBC 3 called The Ugly Face of Disability Prejudice. We're developing more stuff with him. He's helped to cast The Undatables. He also, through Jonathan Glazier, the film director, watching Beauty and the Beast, was cast opposite Scarlett Johansson in the film Under the Skin. So it's been a very mutually beneficial relationship. I mean, you know, Adam, it was the highlight of his life, appearing naked opposite Scarlett Johansson, and then running massively, you know, I saw him on a huge screen running naked through a field of corn or something, trying to escape her.
I didn't know this was going to develop into this conversation, actually. Can you just roll them?
But, you know, that's an example, as I say, of an inclusive approach. leading to opportunities for both of us. And, you know, we're fully supportive of disability off and on screen.
For those who want to know, who may want to go down this road, someone is telling me here that there is a grant called Access to Work. There's an Access to Work grant, which pays for additional support in the workplace for disabled people, but production companies have rarely heard of it, which actually I'm quite surprised by, but I'm a specialist, so... But if people don't know about it, that is something, it'll certainly be on the HRC website, how you'll be able to get access to that. Okay, let's go to our final hurdle, if we may. And that is the thing that we hear, that we hear from producers. I would love to hire minorities, but actually, though they may be intrinsically talented, lovely people, they're not qualified. And Kat, you were saying before this session that there are now requirements from some broadcasters for certain qualifications, which may indeed apply here.
I was saying in terms of I think one of the problems with television is there isn't a clear route in. Now, it's true there's lots of different jobs in television, but certainly in terms of news and current affairs, you know, you are expected to have a qualification in journalism, and not everybody knows that, but, you know, we've got one of the Dispatch's output deals, and everybody who works on that would have that qualification. And I think sometimes that other older professions, like law and medicine, are actually more diverse because there are very clear routes in, whereas in television it's all about who you know, as I was saying earlier. But organisations like the Media Trust do a lot, as well as, you know, the Founders for Schools that I was talking about, and creative skill set, in order to kind of break down the barriers and kind of reach out to young people from different backgrounds.
What do you make of this idea, Pat? That, you know, let me put the case here. We know that some, for example, ethnic minorities and also some disabled people are less likely, for example, to have graduate qualifications. We just know that. That's a fact. Television is now largely a graduate profession. It therefore follows that actually this is going to be true.
Because you don't need to be, I mean, this is about senior roles, not entry level. So we've got an entry level problem that we look at university background as opposed to what your ideas are and what your skills are. But once people are in, I mean, I just think that's bullshit, you know, that there just aren't enough of them. They're there, but the challenge is a lot of them want to tell different stories. And the reason that so many leave, and you know, I've moved around quite a lot, and the reason that so many leave is that when you get further up the food chain and you're a series producer and maybe an executive producer, and you're in that position where you think, I've earned the right now to tell different stories, and you still can't get those stories made, then you ask yourself the fundamental question, is this the industry for me? And I'd love to look at the figures for people dropping out at, in BBC terms, band 9 and 10, so producer, series producer, because I know from my personal mailbag and people that I tutor and sometimes counsel that that's where they go mad. You know, I've done my air miles, I've done everything from research to assistant producer, I've stood in the field at the middle of the night, I've got the shots, I've made the shows, but I want to tell different stories. And no one can hear me, no one hears me. And they're happy for me to do high days and holidays and things for a season, but to take a different approach to something in the middle of the schedule, I can't get a hearing. So sign of madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So to protect their sanity, they leave.
Okay, I want to save a few minutes to go to our audience, but Neil, what do you think, what do you make of this qualifications issue?
The qualifications issue, I mean, for me, I have to say I sort of agree that we find it much harder to recruit into senior roles than we do into up to producer director. Now, I'm not entirely sure why that is. You might be right, but it's certainly something that that's the bit that we struggle with. You know, we're actually finding that in terms of qualifications, as I said, went to the Ravensbourne CDN event the other day. You know, it's really represented by people from Bain background, and we recruited 2 people from that. I'm not sure of their exact qualifications, but they might have been graduates. But I think, you know, people from all backgrounds want to get into TV, although there is a general challenge about how we, you know, attract young people in general in the future when it's an older audience and there's other opportunities in new media. But I think at Betty we do struggle with the more senior roles.
I think it's all about training, and the series producer scheme is going to come back, and that's going to be focused on people from a BAME background. With Asif, who'd been with us, for a while, he actually came up with the idea for Pound Shop Wars, which is, has been a great program for us, and I think that shows. I think just how fantastic it is, in terms of making sure you employ, lots of people from different, and you're inclusive and employ people from different backgrounds. But with Asif, we actually won a creative skill set grant through the Challenge Fund to train him up to be an executive producer. So he wasn't just kind of starting that role without a solid background and without feeling that he knew exactly what he was doing.
The other thing is it's a hierarchy, like a pyramid. So for one person to go up, you need 4 or 5 in the level beneath. And what tends to happen, it happened, I'm sure it happened in your career, certainly happened in my career, you are the one. So when I was at BBC Sport, I was 20% of the senior management team. BBC Sport was rocking. And then I left to go to Travel Channel, and BBC Sport had no black people on the senior management team, and they were in real trouble. And part of the problem is 1 or 2 people seem to be able to rise, but you actually need a group of them to rise in order for 1 or 2 to get to each level above.
Yeah. I think that's really, really critical, that sense of, to answer the question you set, 2 things really: try harder and be part of building the pipeline and the talent which is coming in at the bottom end. Because when I was young, a while ago, TV was cool. When Channel 4 arrived in Kidderminster, that was one of the coolest things that happened in my town. Believe me, that was awesome. That was a whole world of possibilities opening for me. Now, TV has to compete with new media, with the potential to get into creating apps, games, the whole shebang. Why would a young disabled person, why would a young black person choose TV if they look at it and go, can I get to the top of that? Can I have a meaningful career? Can I really fulfill my potential in that? Got to absolutely do things so fundamentally different.
How did you find that? How did you deal with that in 2012, Chris? How did you get people to choose you over somebody else who's going to offer them more money?
Natural charm and yeah. And this was a really interesting case in point. I was lucky enough to be involved with London 2012 right from when we did the bid right through for 10 years till we dissolved the company. Now, we could have easily not done anything on diversity and inclusion and got away with it, to be honest. We could have easily done nothing. And we had the most immovable of deadlines. Nobody was going to go, what a great Olympic and Paralympic Games it was in London 2013. We had the most immovable of deadlines. So when you hear people going, we can't do diversity and inclusion because we're up against it, we, right from the outset, right from the bid, said, if we're going to make great games rather than just good games, we're going to have diversity, inclusion, and access hardwired into every single decision we make. We hold people to account at every level. It's led by the chief exec. All of us as directors were held to account, heads of managers all the way through. And more than that, we drove it through all of our supplier and procurements and into the delivery across the piece, because that was the only way that we believed we would deliver a games which wasn't just made in Britain, but truly reflected modern, diverse Britain. And it's completely doable with leadership, commitment, and then putting all those practical steps in and holding people to account. So it's not a, oh, what about diversity? It's there at the centre of every decision that's made. And it's not about doing anything more than simply keeping a competitive edge in whatever part of the public or private sector you're in. Not about just doing the right thing. It's about having that edge. Look all the US broadcasts and people have been over this week speaking here. Look at Walt Jr. in Breaking Bad. Look what's happening there. We don't want them to be eating our lunch or dinner. We've got brilliant creatives. Look at the guy along here who did the Autistic Gardener. Look at fabulous programs that are being made. But if we don't nail inclusion and diversity, we will slip back and we will not make the brilliant programs that are out there waiting to be made, as Pat said.
Let me, before I come to the audience, let me just put an observation that I have, and it really relates to your point, to Pat's point about the relationship between who's here and what we make, because I agree that people who have different experiences, different perspective on the world, want to tell different stories. And I know for certain that I left ITV a century ago, or whenever it was, because I would never have been able to make a series called Windrush at ITV. It just wasn't in ITV's territory. I am pretty sure that I would not have been able to make things we won't say about race, but are true at any other channel than Channel 4 right now. Now, one of the things that strikes me just circulating here and listening to what people have said is that though this is an industry which sort of prides itself on its inventiveness and innovation and so forth, actually culturally it is pretty uniform. It is really quite uniform. That people might come in different colours and different sizes and so on and so forth, but the conversation doesn't surprise. And it's really interesting. I thought, for example, Armando's lecture was beautifully crafted, but it was a message that could have been held comfortably by everybody. So I'm wondering quickly whether you think that actually part of the problem here isn't just the numbers, but it is the strength and the kind of uniformity of the culture of the industry itself right now. Pat?
I mean, I talk, I hear a lot about, where are the writers, and I say there is a canon of black literature, black theatre, but no, I think very few people in commissioning read them, go there, they all watch the same films, read the same books, go to the same dinner parties, and work in that world. And there's a whole other world out there that apparently needs to earn its chops to move into this world, and sort of totally disregards everything that's been achieved over here. And it just drives me mad.
I'm going to come back to you because I'm not being told that we've actually only got a few minutes, and I want to see if there's anybody who's been listening who's got anything they want to add in. We've got, a lot. You're each going to get about 30 seconds and no more.
Tara Conlan from The Guardian. I just wondered, bearing in mind what Lenny Henry said in the Radio Times recently, that it is down to money. Money does need to be ring-fenced. Whether or not that is really the only way to go. Just talking to companies like Triforce, what it comes down to is trying to get the money so they can get people to London. It comes down to that basic. And if the money's there, the commissioners might have to read a different canon of literature.
We know from the new guidance that the ring fencing proposal is legal, so we don't need to discuss that. Question is, will it be effective? Lady over here.
Stephanie Basari, CNN Digital. I wonder how much commissioners and producers are using technology and data to kind of inform their decisions in program making. For example, there's a gentleman downstairs in the BBC Worldwide Labs who's created an app called Crowd Emotion, which they're using to kind of track real-time audience reaction to trailers. And how can technology like that be used to kind of democratize the process, to combat the uniformity of people who are choosing the programs, to say, actually, what do the people want to watch and what do they want to see on their screens, rather than people who are reading the same books and going to the same films, and etc.
Very interesting. Let's see. There was somebody. There's somebody right in the middle up there.
Hi. I'm just sort of wondering about this debate because the debate sort of started last year for me in my head, and I work at University of Salford, and I think that if the industry and HEIs, higher education institutes, and schools actually started working together, I think there's a real potential. And I think at the moment they work in isolation to each other. But the University of Salford is hugely diverse, but within the areas that we're sort of talking about now, it is less diverse. So we have to start working very closely with schools at primary school age and onwards, really. And I just think it'd be really, really good to get some involvement with industry around this in a very kind of serious, proactive way.
If there's somebody in here from Media City who actually was listening, would you have one thing that you'd want them to do with you?
Well, no, I just think we need to be totally proactive about going out to schools, a bit like Kat was talking about, going out with the founders' schools and actually working with industry and being very proactive and targeted on the schools that we work with. and from HEIs and how they progress into industry, because we can't really level these things at industry if HE isn't working with them, because we work to get students into this industry, and if they haven't got that audience to pull from, then they can't do it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the gentleman down here, if you don't mind, and if you would pass the microphone to Simon Albury after you, just very briefly. No? Blimey, Simon Albury says I don't need to speak. What is going on? Yes, sir.
Hi guys, I'm Chadley. I'm a Channel 4 trainee production scheme member. I benefit really well from the mentorship that I receive from the head of my company at Maverick, Mark Downey. So I wanted to know, do you guys have people who you mentor personally, and if so, what do they look like? Are they different from yourselves in terms of a diversity or diverse background?
Okay, let me come back to a panel. Chris, I wonder if you might say something about the mentoring question, and then I'm going to ask three producers if you would say something about whether you think the ring fencing thing can work, and if you want to say something about the technology question, whether that can help. Chris?
Yes, mentoring, incredibly important. I've mentored a number of people throughout my various careers, if they can indeed be called that. I think it's absolutely vital, and it's a privilege to do it because the person doing it gets as much back as what you're putting into it. Incredibly significant. I think many of the things that Channel 4 have done are incredibly significant in this area, and that's why I was delighted to do the deal with them to be the 2012 Paralympic broadcaster. I think they did things in that coverage which couldn't have been done by another broadcaster at that time. Things like the last leg, absolutely sensational broadcasting, and again, demonstrating that if the will's there, you can do things different.
Okay. Each of you, just very briefly, your producers, you know the credits are waiting.
Well, I think it's great that this document's been done. Every producer should pick one up on the way out. You know, it's a fantastic piece of work, Chris. But also what's really good about it is that it does say we can have a database, because producers have been asking for a database, you know, for years, and now we can have one. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I think ring fencing is a good idea. We always ring fence money to invest in diversity. And our company, I think, you know, should be industry-wide.
Patrick?
I think this is brilliant. I wish it had been around 5-10 years ago. I do believe in ring fencing. I've seen how it's worked in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And the joy of ring fencing is it aligns the channel and the commissioner and the producer. Nobody wants bad product. So the channel, the commissioner and the producer have to work really hard to get the right show or the right idea for the right channel at the right price. That's why it works. It aligns everybody.
Okay, so I think this morning we've removed some obstacles and hopefully some worries, and you can tell everybody, for God's sake, stop whining, get on with it. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you to our sponsors.